My name is Emily. I'm 22 years old. I have to tell this story because silence no longer protects me. What I experienced that night still echoes in my mind.
It's important not to trust strangers or surrender yourself. Some people learn this the hard way. Subscribe to the channel, and if you're ready, sit back and let's get started.
It all started with a message. I met him on social media. Aiden. His profile picture was blurry, a few quotes, but his conversations were captivating. We corresponded for weeks. He built trust. Then one evening, he asked to meet. At a quiet cafe. Outside of town. I accepted. When I arrived at the cafe, it was closed. The windows were dusty. There was a chain on the door. I texted him. "I'm here," I said. The reply came immediately, "Walk a little further. There's a park nearby. It's quieter."
Emily didn't know the cafe had closed months ago. But someone did. Someone who had invited her there.
I walked toward the park. The air was still. The streetlights flickered. There were no people. Just trees. Silent, motionless. Aiden was nowhere to be found. I called. No answer. Then my phone vibrated. A new message, "Go ahead. I see you." I looked around. No one was there. Another message came, "Don't look back." I looked. There was no one. But the trees were different. Their branches were twisted, their trunks cracked. They seemed to lean toward me. The path wound its way into the forest. I kept walking. I passed the same bench 3 times. The path was taking me round and round. Then I saw him. Aiden. He was standing there. His face was invisible. I called his name. He didn't move. I approached. He whispered, "You're here. They said you'd come." "Who said that?" I asked. He pointed to the ground.
Some faces should not be seen. Some names should not be spoken. That night, Emily answered the call not of a name but of a presence. She should not have left, but by the moment she reached that cafe, it was too late. Why?
There were symbols on the surface of the earth. Circles, lines, etched marks. They seemed fresh. As if they had been freshly carved. Aiden leaned down and touched one. "They're listening," he said. "They remember. They want you now." I pulled back. My phone vibrated. But this time, it wasn't a message. A voice. A cry from the speaker. Then a scream. It was my own voice. I dropped the phone. I wanted to run. But the trees moved. The branches closed in on me. They wrapped around my arms. They were cold, wet, like life. Aiden watched. He smiled. I screamed. But no sound came out. The earth opened. I felt hands. They weren't human. They weren't warm. They pulled. Aiden whispered, "You're part of the message now."
Emily was never found. Her last message was, "I'm here. Where are you?" But no one answered. Because some messages shouldn't be answered. But the story didn't end there. A week later, another young girl disappeared in the same park. Same app. Same profile. Same message, "Let's walk." Calm down. The police found no trace. Her phone was silent. But there was a notification on her screen, a message from Emily, "Don't go." When Emily's phone was found, there was no signal. The police who found it had good signal. It was as if someone had taken it and left it there. Some disappearances happen silently. But some leave an echo. Emily's voice is still there. Among the trees. Under the ground. And every new step awakens that echo.
My name is Nathan. I'm 19 years old. I've lived in the same neighborhood my entire life. It was a plain, ordinary, quiet place. The streets were always the same. The houses were all similar. People didn't mix. Everyone minded their own business. No one got too close to anyone else. That's why it was considered safe. But it was also too quiet. Silence seemed to be a habit here. You couldn't even hear birdsong in the mornings. Even the television was muffled in the evenings. It was as if the neighborhood was absorbing the sounds. I didn't notice it at first, but over time, this silence started to feel more like a lack than peace, a lack. I thought something was missing, but I didn't know what, until I noticed that group.
Nathan grew up in this neighborhood. He knew silence. But sometimes silence is a veil. You don't know what's underneath. And some things were meant to remain silent.
That group of friends lived in this neighborhood, but no one spoke of them. Their names were unknown, nor their homes. They only appeared in the evenings. They walked silently, didn't speak, didn't look at each other, but they always moved together. It was as if they had a different way of communicating. I first saw them in the evening. There were 5 of them. They were close in age, but their faces were different. And by different, I mean an indescribable difference. It was as if their expressions were missing. They were neither laughing nor angry. They were simply staring, but not at anything, at nothing. Every day, they walked down the same street at the same time, without speaking, without making eye contact. There was a distance between them, but their rhythm was the same. It was as if they were walking in an invisible line. One time, one of them stopped. The others stopped too. There was no sign, but they all stood still at the same time. Then they all continued walking at the same time. No one in the neighborhood spoke of them. It was as if they didn't exist. Neighbors averted their eyes, children changed their paths. But I was watching. A little more every day.
Nathan had shivered the moment he saw them. But at the same time, he was filled with a terrifying curiosity. He would either attack them, even though he was afraid, or he would somehow suppress his curiosity.
One day, as I was returning from the market, I saw them up close. They passed me. None of them looked at me, but one of them whispered just as they passed me. "You hear them too, don't you?" I stopped. I turned around. They all kept walking. Even the one whispering. It was as if he hadn't spoken at all, but his voice was still in my ear. I didn't know what I was hearing, but from that day on, the sounds in the neighborhood changed. As night fell, the walls of my house began to feel thinner. The sounds coming from outside weren't normal. There were footsteps, but no one was walking. There were whispers, but no one was speaking. And sometimes, I would hear my own name. After that night, I started watching them more closely. They were silent during the day, but at night, they transformed into something else. I noticed it as I looked out my window. Every night at exactly 2:13 a.m., they appeared on the street. The same clothes, the same steps, the same direction. But this time, they were carrying something, a small black box. Each of them took turns touching it. Then the box would be set down on the ground, and they would form a circle around it. They didn't speak, but their mouths moved. It was as if the words were coming out without sound. One night, I mustered up the courage. I cracked open my window. The air outside was different. Not cold, not quiet, like something was trying to seep in. I wanted to take a closer look at them. But at that very moment, one of them lifted its head. It looked directly at me. Our eyes met, but their eyes, they were empty. No expression, no light, just darkness. I closed the window then, but it was too late. They had seen me. The next day, I found a note on my doorstep. There was no handwriting, just one word, "Come." Beneath it was a clock, 2:13 a.m. I didn't sleep that night. I waited. When the hour came, I went out. The street was empty. But a few seconds later, they arrived. 5 people. The same silence. The same rhythm. A black box in the middle. They looked at me. They said nothing. But a voice inside me said, "Come closer." I approached. the box. I looked inside. It was empty, but my eyes were dazzled. It was as if something was there. Invisible, but felt. One of them placed a hand on my shoulder. It was cold, but not like skin. Like stone. "Now, you're starting to hear," he said.
Some invitations are not made with words. Some contacts leave no trace. But Nathan was no longer alone after that night.
The neighborhood changed after that day, but only for me. Others were still normal. Neighbors still smiled, children still played. But I saw other things. Some houses seemed to no longer exist. They had doors, but inside they were dark. Some streets stretched out. The road I used to take in 5 steps now seemed endless. Time seemed distorted. Mornings weren't coming. The nights were getting longer. And worst of all, people were disappearing. One neighbor's voice still came from behind the wall, but he hadn't been seen for days. The owner of the market was opening the shop, but his eyes were empty. It was as if everyone had become a shell.
What could you do if such strange events happened to you? Let me tell you, you wouldn't even have been able to go out that night. On top of that, you wouldn't have survived. So how long could Nathan hold on? Could he be freed from this curse if he wanted to give up?
These experiences were taking a toll on my mental health. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, I decided to run away. I packed my suitcase. I left quietly, but the street was different. I passed the same houses with every step. I kept coming back to the same corner. The neighborhood wouldn't let me go. Finally, I stopped. I was out of breath. At that moment, they came. 5 people, with a box. This time, the box was open. There was something inside. A dark shape. Something that didn't move, but was alive. "You can't go back," they said. "Now you're one of us." I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. I wanted to run, but my feet felt heavy. It was as if I were tied to the earth. "The neighborhood chose you," they said, "because you were listening." Now I walk with them. Every night, at the same time, on the same street, around the black box, without speaking. But there's a voice inside me. It keeps whispering, more is coming. The neighborhood is quiet, but this silence isn't peace anymore. It's a preparation. Someone new is watching us. He's looking out his window. I don't know his name, but I've seen his eyes. He's curious, just like me, and we were waiting for him.
Sometime after these events, Nathan and the mysterious 5 became history, never to be seen again.
My name is Ryan. I'm 26. I live with my girlfriend, Lily. We've been together for 2 years. Our house is small but cozy. We have an old lamp in the corner of the living room, a cracked clock on the kitchen wall. Everything is a little tired, but it's ours. That evening started off just like any other. Lily was making tea in the kitchen, and I was reading in the living room. There was a breeze outside, but it was quiet inside. It was almost 7 o'clock. The lamplight flickered slightly, but we were used to it. This house had its little quirks, but they never bothered us. Lily brought the tea and sat next to me. We sat in silence, without speaking. But it was a peaceful silence. At least I thought so.
Everything seems like a house and a happy girlfriend right now, but tonight feels a little different. Not every night has a morning, after all. Ryan thought that night was ordinary. Just because it started off ordinary didn't mean it would continue ordinary.
Lily suddenly turned her head. "Was the door open?" she asked. I looked. No, the door was closed. "It seemed like it was open just now," she said. I smiled. "The wind," I said. But she didn't smile. That's when I realized it. The lamplight stopped flickering. It was completely still. And the clock had stopped. At 7:06 p.m., Lily fell silent. The house was silent. But this time, it was different. As if she were waiting for something. I was alone in the house when Lily went to the bathroom. The lamplight remained steady. The clock still read 7:06 p.m. But there was a sound outside. Very faint. Like someone walking outside the house. Footsteps. But not rhythmically. Irregular. Like a crawl. I approached the window. The street was empty. The wind had stopped. But the sound still came. This time from inside. From the hallway. "Lily?" I called. There was no answer. I walked toward the bathroom. The door was closed. But there was no sound of running water inside. Just something like a whisper. I put my ear close to the door. I heard one word. It wasn't clear. But it sounded like it was saying my name.
That night, for the first time, Ryan heard a voice that should not be heard. Because some voices whisper only to the chosen.
I opened the door. Lily was standing in front of the mirror. She wasn't moving. Her eyes were open, but she was staring blankly. "Are you okay?" I asked. She turned her head. She smiled. But that smile, it wasn't hers. A shiver ran through me at that moment. I left the bathroom. I returned to the living room. But the sound was still coming from every room now. After Lily left the bathroom, I went in. I wanted to wash my hands. But when I looked in the mirror, I paused for a moment. The reflection was me. But it didn't match my movements. When I bowed my head, she was still looking at me. I blinked. The reflection blinked too. But a second later, there was a delay between us. As if she wasn't imitating me. She was watching me. I looked at the mirror more closely. The glass wasn't fogged, but a coldness was coming from within. I reached out my hand. I touched it. A flicker passed through the glass. And in that moment, the reflection smiled. But I didn't smile. I stepped back. I closed the door. I returned to the living room. Lily was sitting on the couch. But she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were moving. She was whispering. But the words were incomprehensible. I understood then. The thing in the house, it wasn't just a sound. It was an image. And I no longer knew what was real.
That night, Ryan looked at his lover's face. But he didn't see a familiar face. It was as if someone else was inside him. And whatever was inside, they weren't even letting Lily react. Lily was in a bad way. It was as if she wanted to scream for help.
When I returned to the living room, Lily was still on the couch. Her eyes were closed, but her lips were still moving. The whispers continued. But this time, they were coming from somewhere else. The small closet door in the hallway was open. We always kept it closed. Inside were old books, a few blankets, useless things. But now, it was dark. The light was on, but I couldn't see inside. It felt like it was deeper. I moved closer. I wanted to close the door. But a sound came from inside. Very faint. Like a breath. Then a word. Ryan! I pulled back. My heart raced. I called out to Lily. She didn't answer. I looked back at the closet. There was something inside. It wasn't moving, but it was there. A shadow. But the shadow wouldn't disappear despite the light. That night, Lily was silent. But this silence, it wasn't hers. Normally, even when she was silent, there was a warmth. But now, it was cold. Her face was still the same. But her eyes were looking at something else. I asked her something. She answered. But his voice was different. His tone was deeper, more empty. It was as if he'd memorized the words but wasn't understanding them. Are you okay? I asked. He smiled. But that smile, it was a mask. I looked at his face carefully. There was a scratch at the corner of his lips. It hadn't been there before. A shadow like a bruise under his eyes. But it wasn't physical. It seemed to come from within. Lily stood up suddenly. She walked down the hallway without a word. I heard her footsteps, but they had no rhythm. It was as if she weren't walking, but dragging. I wanted to follow her. But something held me back. Not fear. A feeling of not recognizing her. I no longer knew who she was. That night, time seemed to stand still in the house. The clock still read 7:06 p.m. But outside, the night was drawing on. I looked at my phone. The battery was full, but the screen was black. The television was on, but there was no sound. It was as if someone was remotely controlling everything in the house, Lily included, of course. Lily was in the kitchen. But she suddenly moved into the living room. I blinked. She was alone in the kitchen again. I called out to her. She answered. But her voice, it belonged to someone else. Older. More muffled. As if someone was speaking from inside Lily. I turned off the living room lamp. But the light was still on. I went into the kitchen. The chairs were overturned. We had just been sitting there. Lily suddenly disappeared. I searched every room in the house. She wasn't in the bathroom. She wasn't in the bedroom. Then I returned to the living room. She was sitting on the couch. But her face was turned toward me. And her eyes, they were open, but empty. I approached her. "Lily?" I said. She blinked. But a second later, just like a reflection in a mirror, the house no longer felt familiar. The walls were farther apart, the ceiling lower. The hallway grew longer as I walked. I flicked on the light switch, but it didn't come on. I turned on the lamp, but the light poured downward, not upward. It was as if gravity had shifted. Lily was in the kitchen, but her voice was coming from the living room. She was in the living room, but her shadow was in the bathroom. Nothing was there anymore. The house was moving. It seemed to be breathing. A sound came from the walls, from inside, like someone whispering. But there were no words, just a rhythm, like a heartbeat. But this heart was the heart of the house. I went into the bedroom. There was no bed, just an empty space. But there was a trail on the floor, as if it had been dragged. Lily's footprints, but in the opposite direction, as if someone had pulled her back. I closed the door. But the door wasn't a door anymore. There was something behind it. A shape. Human but not. It had eyes, but it wasn't looking. It just waited. That night, everything went silent. Lily didn't speak. The house didn't make a sound. But the silence, it was like a scream. We lay side by side in bed. But something was between us. Unseen. But felt. Lily's breathing wasn't rhythmic. As if someone were breathing for her, I closed my eyes. But the darkness, it wasn't in my eyes. There was a shape in the corner of the room. Human yet not. It seemed to have detached itself from the wall. It was slowly approaching. I wanted to touch Lily. But her skin, it wasn't cold. It wasn't wet. It wasn't there. The shape came to the foot of the bed. It had no eyes, but it saw me. It didn't speak. But one word echoed inside me. "You're part of the house now." I understood then. The house, it hadn't called us. It had chosen us. Lily opened her eyes. But it wasn't her. There was an emptiness in her eyes. And that emptiness, she looked at me. I'm not Ryan anymore. I live in the house. But the house is no longer a place. A body. A mind. A voice.
Ryan doesn't tell anymore. He can't. Because some stories can't be told, they are lived. Like the video and subscribe to the channel to experience beautiful stories with me.